We're off to Walton Hall Park tomorrow and Madrid next week, but there will be no walk down Wembley Way for Arsenal women's supporters for yet another season. Arsenal knocked out of the FA Cup. An FA Cup upset, really, at the hands of Liverpool, who are certainly enjoying the new manager bounce, the interim manager bounce, as Arsenal found out themselves on Sunday. A 1-0 defeat at Meadow Park, a rather cruel Daphne Van Domselaar own goal, Daisy. But I think there won't be many people out there who can say Liverpool didn't deserve it. I think they probably offered more than Arsenal did on Sunday, and you can't begrudge them going through whatsoever.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously it's a disappointing one. I think when we spoke about what the aims were for the season, one of the key things we said was getting to Wembley. I think mostly because of the fans and obviously the supporters and how much it means to be able to go to Wembley. Obviously, like you say, we haven't been there. I think is it 9 or 10 sort of years or seasons now. But yeah,
2021, we played Chelsea there,
yeah.
but yeah, haven't won
In
anything
terms of
since.
winning, yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, Liverpool played an interesting game. Obviously, yeah, they definitely deserved it more than we did. I think that's mainly because Arsenal didn't offer a whole lot going forward. Probably the worst we've seen in a while, especially under Rene Slagers in terms of creating chances. I'm not even sure that we got in the box. From what I remember, it was very boring. Liverpool obviously going and playing very interesting tactics with time wasting, but Arsenal struggled so much with that last season and it frustrated us on many occasions. And it seems like a repeat of that, really. But in terms of the attack, I'm extremely disappointed that we basically created nothing. And ultimately, that's what cost us. I think obviously we can't go down to one player, but we were clearly missing that key presence in the front line, especially out wide. And I also thought a lot of key players didn't have the best performances, and that obviously cost us. I think probably one of the poorer performances from Mariona. Given her a lot of credit this season, but that was definitely probably one of the poorest that we've seen so far.
Mm. How did Liverpool hurt Arsenal, Izzy? They were certainly a physical team. It was a physical game, stop start for a few reasons, some pretty hefty challenges flying in, and Sophie Roman Hogg up front, a real handful. I thought Arsenal sort of struggled with those high balls, those bouncing balls into the box, and the way she took her goal, even though it's gone down as an own goal, was excellent, catching Arsenal out.
Yeah, I think they did hurt us. They were extremely physical, as you said. I thought Sophie Roman Hogg was great. She had a couple of attempts on goal, but I specifically thought Olivia Smith was
Mm.
incredibly impressive, and she had Katie McCabe in her pocket. She was, yeah, Katie was being run ragged up and down the wing, and she was often on the wrong side of the 50-50s with Smith, who just looked so confident on the ball, so comfortable in possession, and a lot of pace, and she was sort of behind a lot of those waves of Liverpool's attack. But they definitely did deserve it on the day. They were much better. We really struggled with the pitch conditions, but didn't seem to kind of do anything to combat that. We weren't able to pass out in our normal way from the back. The ball was bobbling, so the quick, pacey passes were also not an option. And yeah, as you said, Daisy, I think it was a kind of poor performance from a couple of individuals, and it's no one's fault specifically, but it was definitely the lowest player ratings I've ever given. And I struggled to find many positives to say about people. I thought Frida Marden made a little bit of a difference when she came off the bench. She sort of seemed to have contributions immediately as she came on, but it was sort of a little bit sort of not enough, and we just didn't couldn't seem to get much momentum, and it was a real shame. But yeah, Liverpool did look like the better side, and they did deserve that win.
I mean, I wasn't there at Meadow Park, and it's hard to tell, when you talk about the pitch on watching on the stream. But Daisy, you were there. We know it can make a difference. Bournemouth men played there on Saturday. It was a beautifully hot weekend, but maybe that combination. I know when they played West Ham the week before, they had the sprinklers on it as well, and the pitch wasn't in the greatest condition. I mean, it can make a difference, but you can't blame it, can you, at the end of the day? And we're probably still at the stage where if you're playing on a pristine surface in most women's games, even at the top level, you're probably feeling quite grateful. We are lucky when we go to the Emirates and it's in that condition. But unfortunately, more games than not, you are having to get used to playing on something where likely a men's team has played on it the day before.
Yeah, no, it definitely prevented players like Cooney Cross and Mariana Caldente from, being able to get on the ball and create chances. It prevented Leah Williamson from playing through the middle of the park. And also, I didn't think we got like Katie McCabe and Emily Fox on the ball at all in that game and creating chances going up. A lot of them sort of stayed back and had to defend, like you say, because of players like Liv Smith. But if you look towards, where Arsenal have created a lot of chances, it has come from that. And I think the Marnham chance that you mentioned potentially came from a ball crossed out from out wide. So there was definitely, not as good from Arsenal, and you can't just blame it on one thing. I think a lot of it came from the lack of creating those chances, and obviously, yeah, it ultimately cost Arsenal in the end. But you've got to give credit to key players that Liverpool had, and I think, as you said with Liv Smith, that's the player that Arsenal really needed in that game, and potentially you would have got if Chloe Kelly had been available.
Yeah, I think having the combination of a quick, pacey winger and direct winger, but then also those more physical strikers, I think that's probably the two probably players in attack that Arsenal seem to struggle against. We saw, Asai and Martinez do it the week before, dovetailing quite effectively for West Ham. Looking at Everton tomorrow night, Gargo and Payne up front, probably something similar. I know Everton have played a 4-4-2 or a 4-4-1-1. Snoyes as well playing up front. So we'll come on to that a bit later. But Arsenal just didn't have that spark. They didn't have that individual genius, if you like, who's gonna, Chelsea. I know we are found wanting in terms of comparing to Chelsea a lot on this podcast, but they didn't play well against Crystal Palace by all accounts. But Lauren James, so often the player to pop up and dig them out of a bit of a hole. And I don't think maybe Arsenal have that one player at the moment who's just been displaying this individual brilliance. And a lot of the time that comes from a younger player as well. And looking at sort of the age profiles out there again, I guess it's just there wasn't that spark there for Arsenal in the starting 11 or off the bench.
Yeah, for sure. And I think obviously if you look at the substitutes that Arsenal had, and again we talked about that, I think that was back at Stamford Bridge when we talked about Stina Blackstenius and Frida Manum coming on, maybe potentially versus the likes of Guru Wright and Aggie Beaver Jones. I think Lauren James obviously had the impact at that day. It's still the same story, even if you're coming to the likes of Liverpool or these other teams and you're needing somebody who's going to change the game and make that impact or even score off the bench. We just don't seem to have that. I mean, you did a short piece about it and I spoke about Ilestead going up front. It almost felt a little bit forced, a little bit Millie Bright kind of under Serena Wiegman in a World Cup final moment. It just didn't feel like that's the type of people that Arsenal should be turning to. And again, it's come back to that bigger discussion on investment. Have Arsenal bought the right players and have they bought the impact players? In a game that I thought was crying out for somebody like Palova, we couldn't bring her on. We didn't know if that was going to extra time. I think maybe that was considered in Rene's decision, but also not even that. The way that Liverpool played, I mean, they were aggressive, and the last thing you want to do is bring back the likes of Palova from an ACL injury into a game of that nature. So it obviously has cost Arsenal that they couldn't make that substitution. Not to say that would have been the goal scoring contribution they needed, but it definitely would have changed the midfield dynamic potentially as well. But it still seems like Arsenal are missing that presence off the bench, especially somebody who can score a goal in a big moment. We've been crying out for that for a long time.
Yeah, I wasn't able to watch it live, and getting the notification with a few minutes left that Amanda Ilestead had come on for Caitlin Ford. I saw that before the score, and I thought, oh, right, we were seeing out a nervy lead. And then I saw that actually we were 1-0 down, and I thought, okay, that's a very, very interesting change because why not leave Ford on? Why not take another defender off if you want to freshen it up? I get her going up front. I don't know if it speaks greatly to how much Slager's trust Stina Blackstenius and the fact that you put on your second choice striker who signed a contract extension last summer. You've got her and Alessia Russo up front and other players, and you still feel we've got to throw a centre back who's only recently back from maternity leave up. It always smacks from desperation. We love when it was Jen Beattie, but we know why Jen Beattie did it because Arsenal were that short because of injuries that season. This isn't the case. And I think, again, we look at Arsenal's lack of recruitment, if you like. Obviously, Chloe Kelly was cup tied, but I think it's perhaps a little bit of a call that we were, losing to Liverpool. Stina Blackstenius was only brought on with 8 minutes remaining. Leah Valti came on as well. And then Amanda Ilestedt is all you've got available. This is not a squad with loads and loads of injuries, is he? It's not a fine look, is it, for Arsenal to be relying on Ilestedt? And even when she did come on, I think they maybe still didn't they didn't play into her hands. They didn't go long. They didn't go direct. So I think the game management certainly there's a lot of areas that can be criticised.
Yeah, I wrote about it in the piece I did about the sort of takeaways after the match. I sort of thought in the West Ham match, the subs that we made all the difference. Coming on with Kyra Cooney-Cross and coming on, she kind of was able to control the game, and we scored sort of a lot of goals as soon as the subs had been made. But in this match, apart from Freedom Arnhem at half time, the subs weren't made until the 80th minute, and we're already losing at that point. You just think you might have brought the subs on before the before we went 1-0 down, or and then brought on Leo Valti, who then struggled to get into the game, and Stina Blackstenius, they didn't have enough time to kind of settle into it, and Liverpool at that point were already just trying to defend their lead, and it's a little bit too little too late, I think. And then to bring on Amanda Ilestedt, as you said, sort of putting her up front, just it slightly could have left everyone wondering a bit what was sort of going through Slegers' head when she was deciding, who to bring on and where to put them, because it's not something that we've seen this season. Ilestedt up front, we've not seen much of her at all, and sort of do that in a critical match like that when we're trying to equalise, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. She's got the height, so I understand if we'd had kind of those out wide players who were able to put
Mm.
those balls across the box, and she could get her head on the end of it, then that would have made sense. But we were kind of lacking that player out on the wing. Would have, if we'd had Chloe Kelly, it might have been slightly different. And so yeah, the decision didn't make a lot of sense to me to bring Ilestedt on. And I thought it was a shame that we did wait so long till the 80th minute to make subs. A lot of people saying it was sort of reminiscent of Jonas Eidevall and what he would do in those matches when we were losing, and the subs just wouldn't come on and wouldn't come on, and it doesn't give anyone a chance to impact the game. So yeah, I think in the future, if we're down like that, especially in these big Champions League games coming up, it'd be good to see some different kind of game management tactics and different decisions being made.
Liverpool have caused Arsenal some problems the last few years, Daisy. I had a look at it. So obviously 1-0 defeat on Sunday. Arsenal won 1-0 at St Helens. They weren't great at all, and Liverpool probably had a couple of chances, maybe could have done more. Arsenal won 2-0 at Prenton Park last season. I think it was 0-0 at half time, and again Arsenal were pretty flat-footed. And then Liverpool won the first game of last season 1-0 at the Emirates. There is something about them, I think, particularly the physicality, the organisation, but they also had this new manager bounce with Amber Whiteley, who came in and said, quite different to when Renee Slagers was in interim charge. She said, you know what, I'm happy to do this permanently, and she's basically said, I'm going to do things my way. I like this job on a permanent basis. So it was. They did deserve to go through it, and you can see why they make things hard for Arsenal so often.
Yeah, I think for me, when I looked at that fixture and everyone kind of, I noticed there was sort of a sense of maybe not the easier draw, but people seem to be quite happy to draw Liverpool. And I was quick to remind people that this is not going to be an easy fixture. They're going to be up for it in terms of getting as far as they can in these kind of competitions as well. It's kind of separate to the league in that sense. You've got every reason to fight. You saw Tottenham get to Wembley. It's possible for, and United who obviously won the trophy, so it's impossible for anyone to kind of make it through and get past these difficult opponents, and you can't write these teams off by any means. But I do just think, yeah, you're looking at the situation and the way that Liverpool played. There was quite a few critics about the roughness of the way that they played, the time wasting. We had 9 minutes added on, and people were like, 9 minutes. I was like, realistically, 9 minutes was the minimum of what they should have given. As you'll probably agree, it was a lot of time on the floor, a lot of goalkeepers sitting down, players injured, and the crowd was wound up from the get-go. But it depends if you kind of think that that's an awful way to manage a game, or if you think that's actually quite clever. And it's often been Liverpool who've sent Arsenal down to the wire, and like you say, narrow results. So it could have definitely, in most of those games that we've seen previously, though, I have thought it could go either way. Unfortunately, in that game, the most recent one, I didn't think Arsenal ever looked like they were going to win that game, and that's the problem. You can excuse if Arsenal narrowly win 1-0, you can excuse that if they get a 2-0 win and they don't really deserve it, but it never looked at all like Arsenal were going to score, let alone win. So the second that we conceded, we pretty much wrote ourselves out of that game, and I always thought it looked like it was in Liverpool's hands. And had it gone to penalties in those conditions, under those circumstances, I probably wouldn't have trusted Arsenal either. And that's a terrible thing to say, but a lot seemed to not sit right with us that day. The crowd didn't seem its usual self either, and especially with it being at Meadow Park, and contrasting that to the conversation we were having last week, where we were saying this is the place to be, and the crowd is there, and we got behind them, and we came back against West Ham. It's not the same with Liverpool. They're organised much better defensively, and they had the moments where they definitely could have scored sooner as well. So it did really look like Arsenal were not up for it, and I'm surprised because I thought this was going to be one of the trophies that Renee Slagers would have prioritised and really pushed for, knowing that there was an opportunity there. But now she's left with one trophy and potentially the hardest of them all.
Yeah, Arsenal have Liverpool again in a few days' time, a week on Sunday at the
Yeah.
Emirates. So that's going to be really interesting. It is a very, very busy month now, starting with Everton tomorrow night. We're recording this on the Thursday. But Izzy, it's two very tame cup exits, and as much as Renee's got a lot right, she has won some of these crunch games. It does feel like it has become more difficult since she's taken it on a permanent basis. And if anything, there are some weaknesses, some flaws starting to be exposed. And I think it's quite easy for people to say, oh, it's like Jonas Eidevall problems. How much do you look at it and think it is easy to go, actually, well, she was Eidevall's assistant manager, but if you take the praise, you have to take the criticism as well. And if we're praising her for being different to Jonas, all of her criticism can't be then taken back to Jonas, if you like, as well. She has to take some responsibility because it's two pretty disappointing cup exits.
Yeah, and I think, people can say that it reminds them of Jonas's style of management, but as you said, they worked together. She was also involved in his style of management, and so there will be some similarities. But I wonder whether it's not a Renee Slagers problem or a Jonas Eidevall problem, and that it's actually an Arsenal problem. And potentially in the summer transfer window, it needs to be looked at of a slight, not an overhaul, because we have got amazing players. Everyone on that squad's great, but just slightly looking at where Arsenal as a club want to be and making the right decisions in order to achieve that. And that's what Chelsea have done in the last few seasons, and they've really, they've won like so much silverware, and they've brought in some massive signings. They've spent a lot of money, and it's just whether Arsenal as a club are willing to put their money where their mouth is by saying that they want to win these trophies and that they want to be the biggest club in women's football. But we might be the biggest in terms of amount of fans and kind of commercially, but we're not in terms of silverware at all. We've not won anything for a while other than the Conti Cup, which you could say is probably the least prestigious of the competitions that we compete in. And I think it's not fair to criticize Slegers as soon as she gets a loss, because she is still quite new to the job, and football, the nature of football is that there are ups and downs, and you're not going to win everything. But it is, fair enough for the fans to question some decisions that have happened, and to look ahead to the summer and hope that we can make some changes that mean that we can attack next season with a bit more chance. Because she says we're still competing in two competitions, but we all know that WSL title race is over for us, and it's just now about getting into the Champions League for next season. And yeah, as you said, Daisy, the Champions League's the only trophy we're left with, and I don't see how we'd be able to compete with the likes of Chelsea, Barcelona, or even Lyon if we get through the next round. And they just sort of seem to have much more of a winning mentality than we do.
It does make me laugh though when people criticize Renee for saying we're still competing in two competitions. Like, she's not going to sit there and go, oh well, we're going to put our feet up and play the kids for the WSL. And competing, you never know what happens. You've got to win every game that's in front of you. That's starting with Everton away tomorrow. Just to finish up on the FA Cup though, Daisy, it's interesting. It seems like an accumulation really now, rather than, I think on the men's side, it's probably similar. And we'd like an FA Cup, but it's not happening. It's not a competition that sacks managers. It's more one that keeps them in their job, isn't it? As we've seen before in both the men's and women's competitions. But at the end of the day, fans are starting to get a bit fed up of watching on from the wings, not being involved in these cup finals. I know we've had these two Conti Cup finals, but instead of being at Derby on Saturday, Arsenal have got to travel to Everton on Friday. Again, for however many years in a row, Arsenal on the final day of the season are watching on from the wings as other teams compete for the title and Chelsea win it. There must just be a feeling in and amongst the fan base of, actually, are the club getting too used to just taking European football every year, to going some distance in these competitions, winning one of the domestic cups? What is good enough? And that's a really hard question for this season, because any season where you have a change of manager, I think your expectations have to lower, especially with how the start to the season went. But as you say, we all said at the start of the season we could do with an FA Cup run, getting to the final at least, and to not even have that. I mean, obviously it would have been Chelsea in the semis, so we can't take that for granted whatsoever. That's a whole other story. But the Conti Cup's been great for those reasons, but everyone knows the FA Cup is the bigger competition, if you like. A trip to Wembley there's 19,000 at Derby. You could have 60, 70,000 at Wembley.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, I think every time that we've talked about an individual game knocking us out of a competition, we've always looked at it as one individual game. We looked at it against Manchester City and we said, oh, it's Renee Slager's, like you say, she's a new manager coming in and it's a narrow defeat. We lost in the dying minutes of the game and it happened. We get knocked out of the Champions League in the semi-finals against Wolfsburg and we left that game thinking, I'm happy in some ways because we got that far with an injured team and the circumstances at the time were the ACL injuries that we had. We then get knocked out in qualifying and we have to skip over it and go through the rest of the season and just pretending that hadn't happened because that's the nature of football. But it does seem like, based on what happens this season, separate to Renee Slagers and putting all of the blame on her, this is now becoming a question of, like Izzy said, the bigger picture. What is the bigger picture? I don't think that Arsenal as a club, especially Claire Wheatley and those involved in that side of things, are going to get away with it for much longer. I think Arsenal fans are really starting to wake up now. We've kind of just took it as these are the excuses that we've had before. We had injuries, or we had a poor manager that we did it with. By the end, we weren't backing anymore. Now you've got a really really great manager who's got the potential. You've got key players there to build off. Like Izzy said, we don't have to get rid of every single player. I think some people potentially look at it from one extreme to the other. They look at it and think, right, now we need to lose Leah Williamson and we need to lose Daphne and we need to lose Katie McCabe, rather than looking at it and thinking, where can we reinforce that so there's more competition? Why can we not get another centre back who we actually trust, who's going to compete for those positions, who's going to push the likes of, let Niswanger try and push Katie McCabe a little bit for her position. This is maybe where the problems come. Chelsea have had that consistently. They've always had two or three people competing for every single position, and it's made those in who are first choice work harder. You've even got Lucy Bronze competing for her position. This is the problem that Arsenal, I think, a trap that they've fallen into, and we've accepted it by excuses. But now it's gone too far, and potentially you probably will excuse Renee Slagers if she doesn't win the WSL, and you probably will excuse her if she gets knocked out in the Champions League. But next season, I know we say this every time, but it does kind of feel like a make or break. Renee will get another transfer window, and she'll settle into her role, and she'll get to buy some players hopefully. But if we really don't go for it next season, there can't be an excuse this time.
Yeah, and the interesting thing for me is that's Renee's last season.
Yeah.
It's come around very quickly, but she's on a pretty short-term contract. So actually, a lot is down to her this summer to be quite pushy and say these are the players I want, and almost be quite radical with some of these decisions, because it's not a long-term contract. This is her last season. She'll obviously be wanting for more, but again, if there is that underperformance, then again it gives the club a decision to make. I think the final point I'd make on this game is that there's a lot of players who've been at Arsenal a while now without winning this major silverware often. And do Arsenal have a squad of players who are sitting there going, you know what, if we don't win, I'm going to leave for other clubs. I'm going to leave for bigger and better things next season? Or are they coming to different stages in their career where actually they're happy to be at a club like Arsenal with what that comes with, and competing for competitions, but maybe not winning them? You look at some players, we've spoken about Mariona Caldente the whole time. I'm not saying she's at the prime of her career, and Arsenal are lucky to have her, but she is used to winning things on a big scale, internationally, domestically. Arsenal's squad is not full of players who are used to sweeping the floor, if you like, with trophies. And that's what interests me, is that when you bring in these players who are used to winning everything every single season, that puts pressure on the club to deliver for them. We saw when Miedema, after 2021-22, had interest from other clubs, and she said, we were almost like, that's interesting, because she has the decision then to go on and win things. And almost her thinking was, we, as a fan base, we thought, well, if we don't start winning things, we're going to lose players like this. I don't think Arsenal are in that situation at the moment. I don't think there are players in that category who are going to pack their bags if they don't start winning silverware soon. And I think that's a little bit concerning. I think you want players who are going to put pressure on the club, are going to drive the club forward. And this is where that new investment in the summer comes in.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're looking at the likes of the big players that Arsenal might be able to attract as well. And I think how are you going to you can attract those players, the ones who want to come and try something new, like Mariona Caldente. That's easier to say, look at the fan base and look at the stadiums you'll play in. That's great. But if you're trying to, I'm thinking of the situation, obviously, this is a big name and Arsenal are obviously interested in her and well, they expressed some interest in Trinity Rodman. You look at that, young player who's saying I think she came out the other day and said, if I don't play in Europe, I won't have fulfilled my career. Well, that's great, but how are you going to convince a player like that it's just about how many people we get to the stadium, or it's just about, how many people come and want your autograph? It's not going to work in that way, and that's not a long-term project. I think for too long we've become complacent with the players that we have. There's still fantastic players in there, and it doesn't mean they have to leave. It just means we need a mixture of a combined, players, different styles, different ambitions. I think it's okay to have the ones who are passionate about playing for the badge and playing for the club. You're always going to have that. But then to bring in the ones like maybe build more on the Mariona Caldentes. Try and look for those kind of players who have won a lot. And if you combine that with the experience plus the passion for the club, I do think that that's kind of the success that Arsenal should be looking for. And if you continue to look for a really good winger or another midfielder, or you try and build that further, I do think that that's kind of where Arsenal should be looking. But if only it was up to us to change the nature of this club.
Yeah, very interesting. And of course, everyone in this squad wants to win. It's just that I don't think we hear very much, do we, about players going, if we don't win anything this season, I'm out of here. And I almost love when players, when you sort of get that impression from players. But yeah, I'm sure they're all want to be winning things, as do the Arsenal fans. And a couple hundred of them have got to make the long old trip up to Walton Hall Park on Friday night. Please, Everton, if you have any substance in these plans to move your women's team to Goodison Park, I'd absolutely love to go there. I haven't been as a fan or anything, so hopefully that happens, just to really get things away from Walton Hall Park a little bit. It's not a big ground. I think there's still tickets on sale as well. A Friday night game, and Liverpool are playing Man United at Anfield the same night, so it's the scheduling, as always, has been perfectly thought through. But Izzy, Everton, Rene Slager's said they're one of the most unpredictable tactical teams in the league. They obviously held Arsenal to a very dull 0-0 draw at the Emirates. They played a sort of 5-4-1 in that, but recently they've been playing more of a 4-4-2. They could start with a very deep block and a back five, but like Liverpool, like West Ham, they've got threats to hurt Arsenal with. And they had a very good January window as well after their takeover. The whole club getting that American investment. They brought in Hayley Ladd, Marin Mjelde, Kelly Gargo. This feels like a bit of a banana skin.
Yeah, and I think we'd be silly after, especially after the weekend's result, to go into it thinking that it's going to be an easy win, because we've been burned by that before. We had that in the West Ham game. We've had that with Liverpool at the weekend, and probably with Everton back in October when we ended on that 0-0 draw. Very disappointing day at the Emirates there. I think everyone was excited for the new season and then sort of went almost straight in with that. It was just a bit of a wake up call. And yeah, it's hopefully going to be a successful evening for Arsenal. But again, small stadium, probably a bad quality pitch. And so we don't want to get hurt by that like we were at the weekend. I know you can't just put it down to that, but we want to minimise any kind of risks that there are that we're not going to be able to do well. But yeah, as you said, they've brought in a lot of fresh talent in January, and I imagine that they will have quite a low block and they'll be kind of coming for Arsenal on the counter attacks. And Arsenal have historically struggled to get past those low blocks, especially in the later bits of the game on the weekend. We struggled because they were trying to just defend their lead, and if something similar like that happens at Everton tomorrow, then we do struggle to break down those teams defensively and be creative enough and clinical enough to get through and make those goals happen. Last season, when I can't remember, was it a draw or a loss when Izzy Hobbs scored
One
that
all, yeah.
1-1, yeah. So we haven't had a great track record in recent matches with them of coming away with a win. So it would be nice if we did tomorrow. But yeah, I think they're going to be unpredictable, as Slegers has said, and we've got to have our wits about us and be on our toes and ready to perform.
Mm. Yeah, Victoria Pelova still waiting for her return. There were no first teamers involved with the under 21s. Laia Cadena wasn't pictured in training, so I'm planning to ask Renee about her, because obviously she's been left out for the last couple of games. But Daisy, just a word for the fans. I think this is one of those games I throw it in the sort of Lee Sports Village category where it's just so difficult to get to, putting it on a Friday night as well. Obviously, you live up north, but still not particularly close to that part of Liverpool at all. It's nearly 3 hours on the train from Derby, which doesn't feel far from Liverpool really as well. This is one where a few days before going to Madrid on Monday or Tuesday, this is serious commitment, and credit to all of you who are making the journey up.
Yeah, I mean the 7 o'clock kickoff as well. Let's add that to it. If you finish sort of work down south at a reasonable hour, it's going to be impossible for you to get there. I haven't actually had a look at how many are actually planning on traveling. I don't actually know off the top of my head, but it's going to be an interesting one. I think. Look. Izzy makes very good points, and the only thing that I'm absolutely hoping for is it's a chance for Arsenal to prove themselves that actually, René Slager's to say that that is a one-off, not this is going to be a streak now. We're not going to continuously just accept that we're going to lose to these teams. Chelsea found a way, obviously that was tough for them against Everton, and there's no discrediting them at all in the slightest by saying that we can go there and beat them. But also, if you're thinking about going to Madrid and how big of a game that is away, you don't want to be coming off the back of a Friday night loss against Everton. I know there's a bit of time between, but still, not too much time between, and also that's just not the kind of energy that you want to go into next week with. Yeah, I think obviously it's one of those fixtures that you like you say it's a nothingness fixture, but also you can't afford now. I just looked at the table before we recorded this and thought actually we can't afford to drop 3 points or even 2 points to Everton here, because United are gonna storm ahead and we're gonna lose that spot that we want, and City are gonna obviously be challenging for that as well. So it really has become now a case of we actually can't afford to lose, and we've got other games coming up that are going to be tougher to get through, like you say, Liverpool at the Emirates, potentially another tough one. So it's one of those fixtures where you can't just write it off at this point. We can't have too much focus on Madrid because we're losing sight of that top three position that we need for Champions League football next season, and I wouldn't like to go through awful qualifying again. So it's just it really is one of those that we need to win, but it definitely, you're right, it could be one that throws a spanner in the works. And I'm just hoping that Arsenal and Slakers and having Chloe Kelly back and hopefully having Palova coming in might just be enough. But it's crazy that we're sitting here saying that we need just enough to beat Everton. But I guess it shows how much teams have come on in the league as well to be able to say that this is how tight it really is.
Mm. Yeah, Everton have a good defensive record, 22 conceded, but they've only scored 14 goals in 15 WSL games, which will be the concern. But certainly the investment, they've had so many injuries. At the start of the season, it was long-term injury after long-term injury, and even now there are more players being sidelined and coming back. They've had a really difficult season, and if anything, are probably doing well to be 10 points above bottom side Crystal Palace. They obviously beat Manchester City 2-1 in December, and with City and Chelsea playing the Subway Cup final, this is a good opportunity. If Arsenal do win, they go 4 points clear of Manchester City, who have Nick Cushing back. That was a massive bit of news earlier this week, but basically this month is just Man City playing Chelsea over and over again, and I think we're quite happy to just sit back and watch some of that. Just finally, who are you both pipping for the Subway Cup final on Saturday? I'm going to be there. I'm getting a very early train out of Liverpool to go and cover that for the halfway line. But Izzy, are you fancying Sonia Bonpastor to take her first bit of silverware, or can Nick Cushing get the ultimate new manager bounce?
I would say I might almost go with City because I think, we've beaten Chelsea in two League Cup finals, and I wonder whether they just have a slightly bad record there in the last couple of seasons, and maybe City. I'd like to see City beat Chelsea in this one because I think it sets a kind of more exciting tone for the month of Chelsea versus City, that Chelsea aren't just going to win all four, but I sort of do think deep down it will probably go Chelsea's way, but maybe City will have the new manager bounce that we've kind of a few different teams, well, sort of over half the league have experienced this season, and be able to overcome them. But I'm hoping for a game with lots of goals because that'll be a more interesting watch for the neutral.
Yeah, my concern is that if Manchester City do win it, that's only going to be motivation for Chelsea to push for the others. I think I think that would be the ultimate new manager bounce ever, but I just don't see Chelsea letting off. Unfortunately, this is the most scared I've ever been that they are going to just go and do pretty much anything. We've seen them go down in WSL games and find a way back. We've seen them somehow battle against Leicester when they were they could have and should have lost that game. And it pains me to say, but this is probably the strongest that Chelsea have looked. I don't know if City have enough in them to kind of get over the line. But if City are going to get a win in any of the games, I do favour that this is probably the one that they will. But it's a quick turnaround for Nick Cushing to get that side organised. And I think what was it was there like 4 days or something between, I can't remember. It was a very short period of time between him being appointed and them having to play this game. So I'm interested to see how he sets up as well. Is he just going to continue kind of with the style that City have been playing, or is he going to expect them to learn all this before a cup final? It's really interesting decision, really.
At least Man City's scouting team have looked at their assignments for the month and probably seen quite an easy task. You're playing one team over and over again, and then
Yeah,
you can look at these
Yeah.
little tweaks between the games, but it's absolutely fascinating. It's going to be really interesting how it all pans out. Daisy, you'll be in the away end tomorrow with a bag full of Guna fanzines, our first ever print edition dedicated to Arsenal women. So people basically have to keep an eye out for you. We'll put some tweets out and stuff closer to the time. But for those who are making the journey up, make sure to grab a copy of the Guna, and we will all be in Madrid as well. Plus Susie and Lumi, we're going to have a massive Guna fanzine presence out there. So I think our next podcast will hopefully come from a nice cafe or something in the Spanish capital. So Daisy, I'll see you tomorrow.
yeah, looking forward to it.
And Izzy,
See you
Sangria,
in
I think,
Spain.
is your suggestion for
Yep.
Monday night.
And I'll be wherever the sangria is and ready to cheer on the girls. I've got my new scarf from Arsenal's new women's range, so I'm
Mm,
gonna be sporting that. I'm very excited.
Fantastic. Well, looking forward to both. We'll have our usual coverage to come tomorrow night from Walton Hall Park.